For more on this, let's bring in former Obama foreign policy advisor David Tufori and Foundation for Defense of Democracy's founder Cliff May. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Cliff, the attacks last night against ISIS positions really does underscore that the threat from ISIS hasn't finished.
Exactly right, and it's very important to understand why. ISIS has been dispossessed from the territory it once held, but it is still an organization that is dedicated to jihad against the West, as is al-Qaeda, as is the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, all of them. They believe, we need to understand what they believe. They believe they're fighting a war against the West, a holy war against Christians and Jews and others that is 1,400 years old. They will not make deals. They will not be easily dissuaded. They're not going to go home and open yoga studios. They're going to fight as long as they can. If we understand that reality, then we can have a strategy for defeating them over time.
You know, David, you look at what the president had to say about the government, the interim government in Syria right now. They very pointedly, the White House said this was not to blame or not to put any blame on the current Syrian government. What do you think about how much the U.S. can trust the interim government there?
So it's a very important question. I was in Damascus, Syria 3 weeks ago, and the city is open. There are a lot of companies that are going there that are interested in helping rebuild Syria, and there's a lot of positivity and hope. We are going to have to depend upon Shara, the interim president of Syria, doing the right thing in terms of being inclusive and having a political process that moves towards elections and that recognizes that Syria is a very diverse country with different ethnicities and religions. If he does that successfully, they're going to be an ally. And these strikes that we did on ISIS in Syria are notable because for the first time, we actually did it in cooperation with the government in Damascus, whereas we were doing strikes all through the Assad regime on ISIS, even though we couldn't cooperate with Assad.
Things are changing very quickly in Syria, have changed very quickly in Syria. That's also the case in Venezuela, Cliff. You look at what the administration's doing, the firepower it's bringing down there. I mean, is this bluster, or are we preparing to move on Maduro?
Well, I hope it's not just bluster, because if Maduro, at this point, if Maduro survives, that's going to look like we were just bluffing, like President Trump was just bluffing. President Trump recognizes that we have adversaries, enemies in Latin America. Venezuela is one of them. Cuba is certainly one of them. Nicaragua is one of them. And we have a tremendous amount of Chinese influence, Iranian influence, and Russian influence in the southern hemisphere. Cuban influence especially.
In Venezuela, yeah.
And Venezuela, absolutely. The Cubans are absolutely there. If you look at the national security strategy that just came out from the Trump administration, he wants to focus a lot more on the southern hemisphere, on Latin America. To do that, I think, and he hasn't explained this as well as I think he should, he seems to be starting with Venezuela, and he wants Maduro, who is illegal, who is a narco-terrorist. He's indicted here in the United States. He wants him out, and he's going to try to do it through pressure. But it's not going to be easy. But among other reasons, the Cubans, the Russians, the Iranians are saying, don't leave, we'll support you.
Mm-hmm. And David, you look at Venezuela right now. What are the chances that dislodging Maduro can return Venezuela to what it was in the 1990s when it was a prosperous society? It's got a lot of oil wealth, for example. Or, I mean, could the U.S. really get mired in something ugly here?
The Trump administration hasn't talked about that. Let's note that Maduro is a dictator and he's a criminal. And you don't have to just trust the Trump administration. The UN had an independent commission in March that reported that Maduro was responsible for crimes against humanity. So it would be good for the world and for the Venezuelan people for Maduro to be removed. But what's not clear is if the Trump administration has a plan for what comes after if we do remove Maduro. And this does feel a little bit like how we got into the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and including Iraq had about 30 million people. That's the population of Venezuela. If we don't know whether the people in Venezuela would be okay with being occupied if we have to send U.S. troops into Venezuela. And also, we didn't have a plan in Iraq for securing Iraq, for making sure that after the regime fell, that we could there would be a security, there would be there would be an army and police, and we also would have to think about that for Venezuela. If we take out Maduro and take out the people close to him, how are we going to make sure that Venezuela stays safe so it can move towards a democracy, which would be the goal?
Cliff, very quickly, how does the administration do that?
It's a little easier than it was in Iraq, I would say, for a following reason. One, you mentioned it. This country was democratic. This country was prosperous. It does have oil. You don't have like I had in Iraq, the Shia, the Kurds, all that. You have one people. You have an elected leader that you can help reinstall. It is less challenging to get Venezuela back on track than I think it would be in Iraq. But you're right. It's not going to be easy. You need to plan for the day after, and there need to be very good plans, which we didn't have in Iraq.
Yeah, we'll be watching it. David Tafuri, Cliff May, thank you so much for joining us. Very much appreciate it.